The voice of sharing. 旅人那乡
ASEAN Breakfast Call. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hello. This is Arlene.
And this is Grace.
And this morning, we will be having more news from Southeast Asia at our ASEAN Breakfast Call.
That's correct. So what shall we start with?
Oh, before we start our discussion today, so how are you?
I'm feeling better, thank you.
Great. Because you've been having a few coughing, isn't it?
Yeah, few coughing and a bit of sore throat.
I blame it on the haze.
Yeah, haze could be one of the reasons.
So it's a sign that Malaysian government needs to step up its game and put in place some, laws on haze, just like what the Indonesian government and also the Singaporean government are doing.
Before it gets worse, for sure.
Before it gets worse. And another thing that we want to talk about before it gets worse is the Myanmar Rohingya people.
Yes.
So Myanmar gives citizenship to some Rohingya Muslim, only some apparently.
Yes. And also the number is identified as 209 Muslims displaced by sectarian violence after the first phase of the project aimed at determining the status about 1 million Rohingya whose claim to be nationality have been rejected in the past.
1 million is a huge number.
Yes, it is. And also Rohingya in Myanmar, they have never been recognized as their own nations and also on neighboring countries. So giving the citizenship to these populations will mean something to them.
Mm-hmm. Rohingya Muslim minorities in Rakhine State, they have a lot of limitation, especially even when they are in their own borders within their own state, which is the Rakhine State. For example, they need permission to move from their village to another camp. This is really a lot of problem, you know. Just imagine right now you are in, let's say you are in KL, you want to move to PJ, just maybe for the reason that you want to visit your relatives in PJ. You actually have to ask the permission from the military general or the authority there, just so to ensure that you will be safe. Even then, it doesn't mean that you will be safe. You just need to ask permission, as if like you are some sort of goods that needs to be transported from one place to another place.
That's not really something. It's very practical, and also we have to go through quite a few procedures to do so. But in fact, the Rohingya in Myanmar, they've been living there for generations.
They have been living there for generations, but at the same time, people claim that they are from Bangladesh. That's why they actually name them as the Bengali rather than Rohingya.
So that's the term that you use them. And also officers from Myanmar Immigration Ministry told that around 1,000 Muslims took part in the pilot verification process in the deployment in the certain area, which is also a certain distance from the capital.
It's a very small number compared to the overall number of 1 million Rohingya, if you look at the bigger picture. And one thing about Rohingya that we need to know, almost 140,000 remains after being displaced in deadly clashes with ethnic Rakhine Buddhists in 2002. So there are quite a huge number of people are being displaced right now, living in camps that actually are really subpar when it comes to the lifestyle. A lot of the Rohingya people, they don't have good access to healthcare, to education, and even to their own human rights. As a citizen of Myanmar, they are not even being part of the census of Myanmar. They are in fact listed as foreigners, Bengali.
So giving this citizenship to those Muslim community who will be now recognized by the government as indigenous to Myanmar. So it will mean something to them, and also hope that there will be a more improvement in the Rohingya community.
Hopefully the ceasefire discussion or agreement between the Myanmar government and the Rakhine Rohingya Muslim in Rakhine State would somehow create a fresh start in terms of the lives of Myanmar. As we all know, Myanmar is definitely transiting, and a lot of the ethnic issues need to be solved if it wants economic progress. Economic progress is not just about money, it's also about stability. Stability means no clashes, no conflict, or if you have conflict, you have a mechanism to solve it, a proper mechanism that doesn't involve violence. So that is one of the challenges that Myanmar government needs to improve.
And also, United Nations agency, they've been trying to working on this Myanmar issue when it comes to Rohingya. And one of them is they have adopted the policy of avoiding the word using Rohingya. So because it angers officers and nationalist religious leaders in certain states who can block them from carrying out the humanitarian work.
Another news that was reported, which was also the same news, stated that Myanmar peace process is at a very crucial state, as I mentioned earlier. It is definitely at a stage where whatever they do will somehow determine the future of Myanmar government and Myanmar society.
And also the government has made ending over half a century of civil strife in the country's minority border areas a key priority as a nation emerges from decades of the junta rule.
As we all know, whenever there is a strong militaristic government, there will be a strong rebel groups. And in the case of Myanmar, besides the Rakhine, the issues within the Rakhine state with the Rohingya Muslim, they also have other ethnic conflict with separatist groups such as Kachin Independence Army, which is KIA, and Taang National Liberation Army, TNLA, in Shan State, which is also another problem with the government of Myanmar, because they want to sign ceasefire agreements with all these different armed ethnic groups, and whatever they say, the armed ethnic groups will determine the peaceful negotiation between both parties. And currently there are 16 major armed ethnic groups that the Myanmar government needs to deal.
And also everyone accepts the Myanmar peace process is at a very crucial moment. And also this is what the former general at the forefront of the peace effort said. And also negotiators are hopeful that they are inching closer to deal with these rebels after several previous rounds of strikes in Myanmar.
It's a sign that in Southeast Asia there's a lot of ethnic armed groups. Of course, we are talking now with Myanmar, but if you look at the bigger picture, a lot of the countries, including Malaysia in the past, are facing with a lot of these armed groups. With Malaysia, it's a bit interesting because the ethnic armed groups are not really Malaysians. They remember last year the Lahad Datu incidents by the Sulu, one of the Sulu armed groups that came all the way from Mindanao. So these are the challenges that governments in Southeast Asia needs to deal, because they can't be too harsh on these rebel groups. The cause that they are pushing forward are the cause that these minorities are facing. So the government needs to listen to them, but at the same time need to ensure that the armed groups are able to drop their weapons and agree on ceasefire, as well as agreeing on a peaceful negotiation between both parties.
But then to actually come forward to have a peaceful agreement between those armed group and then also the government, it's going to take some time to come with it, because the ideology is different, and then how they form these groups, certain groups, is also they have their own set of mindset. So to come to the peace agreement, that will be something else actually.
It definitely will be something else. And when you say that it takes some time, it's true. Any form of peaceful negotiation will take time, and not just peaceful negotiation, even in terms of leadership, rebuilding society, not just rebuilding society, but asserting legitimacy of a new state government. And right now, I'm definitely talking about the Selangor government. As we all know, yesterday we reported that Azmin Ali is definitely the new Menteri Besar of Selangor, and there were mixed review about him, and a lot of people are still, in a sense, unable to be sure that can he be a Menteri Besar? Is he fit for his job? There's a huge question that a lot of people are asking to themselves, and a lot of them are definitely Selangorians. As you know, Selangor is the richest state in Malaysia.
And then it does affect a lot of any other states in Malaysia as well. So before he was appointed as MB in Selangor, there were long discussions between him and also Wan Aziza. But at the same time, after the appointed MB, it's just been less than a day. But there's still a lot of discussion is going on the possibilities that we can look through after he's appointed as a new MB in Selangor. So one of the case that he actually announced to public is his priority is to reduce crime and dengue cases.
Dengue, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
I know. I mean, I know that people, when they analyze Azmin Ali, people would usually go to the fact that is he a likable person in terms of his personality? Is he a Malaysian from Malaysia person? As we all know, he has been known for someone that doesn't really have a good rapport with the non-Malays. He's more popular or influential among Malay PKR members and also among the Malay community. But even among the Malay community, people are a bit dubious of him. A lot of the times when it comes to policy announcement, it will not be him. It will be someone else, like Rafizi, for example, or Nurul Izzah. When it comes to him, people do not really understand what is his agenda, what is his policy, not just for Selangor, but for Malaysia as a whole. Whenever he come out to speak to the media, it's always about some form of party strategy. Perhaps it is his role, but at the same time, Malaysians want to know, especially Selangorians, what is his plan, what is his agenda next. When it comes to Khalid Ibrahim, because of his corporate background, people know that he will take care of the interests of businesses, and that has been shown in his track record with with ruling Selangor for almost two terms. And with Azmin Ali, he's still very fresh. He doesn't have the experience yet. And with that, a lot of people are still a bit mixed about him.
They have a mixed ideas about new Menteri Besar in Selangor, but at the same time, we also have to wait and see what his priority is, and also focus is on this Selangor state and also in the government.
Since we don't have local election, so whatever Menteri Besar that we have is based on what the party wants. And when it comes to the case of Selangor, even the Sultan has been meddling with the issue on the Menteri Besar election. When it comes to the legitimacy of the leader for Selangor, people are still very much unsure whether they want to give their own endorsement towards this new Menteri Besar. So he has to work twice as hard compared to the previous Menteri Besar to show that he's a credible leader.
Yes, and also it's a matter of buying the people's credibility, and it will be only shown through his work, and then he not only what he actually announces, but also through his work and his effort to improve this particular state.
So when he said that his priority is to reduce crime, dengue cases, waste management, and improving road conditions in the state, is definitely a positive move. But as we all know, the issue in Selangor right now, number one, of course, is a water crisis. Number two, economic issue. People want to be sure that Selangor is still the hot spot or the center for economic activities. This is one thing that Azmin Ali, in fact, should push for.
So this particular news regarding that his priority to reduce crime and dengue cases, and also he added by saying that is the biggest challenge now. So it may actually bring out opposite opinions from the public point of view, saying is this the really biggest challenge in Selangor itself? Whereas they are also facing other issues. That's the reality they're facing right now.
So for Azmin Ali, there's a huge ball game for him to somehow be able to play the game and ensure that at the end of the day he's able to create confidence within the Selangorians. At the same time, talking about confidence, emerging nations usually would view corporate as would be more confident about corporations compared to countries that are that are developed, like first world countries. It's interesting to see because emerging economies, for example, in Southeast Asia, China and India and other emerging nations, when they think about corporations, they think about progress, they think about economic development. But that is in contrast with countries that are developed. When they think about corporation, they would think about misusing, they would think about greed, they would think about misusing funds, they would think about trying to con people into believing what is not real.
And then they see the quite a potential in these developing countries rather than a developed country. And according to the survey, 72% of the public in emerging economies saw the corporations as source of hope rather than fear.
So when it says a source of hope, a lot of countries that are developing in the past, they face a lot of hardship, poverty, dictatorship, and other forms of suppression where they are unable to express their personal their personal view of personal freedom. That is where the idea of venturing into being an entrepreneur or into having a new enterprise is very tempting.
And also, most of those surveys, including 70% of the general population and 67% of business leaders in the United States, and that agree that it was important for corporations to pay their fair share of taxes.
So taxes is definitely one of the key components when it comes to the opinions of these people. And the survey also found that 57% of the general population and 53% of executives believe that the corporations take advantage of tax loopholes to avoid paying their fair share of tax, like you mentioned earlier. And this is much more apparent in countries that are developed. And for developed countries also, according to the survey, 72% of the public, 52% of the developed economies feel that cooperation is a source of fear rather than hope, compared to 72% of the public in emerging economies. With that, it seems like it's much more feasible for corporation to invest in countries that are just starting out. Yeah, they are developing and just starting up. And with that also, it shows that corporations would, there's no such thing as corporation being just in one place. They can always branch out and go to another place if they feel that they are more acceptable in those countries. And with the survey, does it show that corporation would move their headquarters from countries that are more developed to less developed? Do you think so?
Well, moving the headquarters to the developing countries, I'm not so sure about that. But definitely, all those corporation, the company itself, they see the potential in the developing countries, so they want to invest more, and then with the emerging cooperating countries.
Mm-hmm. The reason why I asked you, which is not really a question but more like a statement to ask, is because when it comes to cooperation, even though the survey shows that it's much more feasible for corporation to invest in emerging economies because people have more confidence in cooperation. But if you look at the bigger picture, corporation would rather invest in developed economies rather than emerging economies, partly because in developed economies, the other mechanism like peace and stability are already in place. Like what our discussion earlier on Myanmar. One of the key area that Myanmar government need to ensure in terms of economic progress is to ensure that there are peace and stability within all the states in Myanmar, and that the way to do forward is to make sure that there are ceasefires agreement and there are peaceful negotiation happening between both parties. And with developed countries, definitely their economies and their political system have matured. Regardless whoever take power, people will it will happen in a peaceful transition compared to emerging economies.
So definitely, this is something that we can look forward to in terms of this economic development. And also, one of the things that worldwide chair and the chief executive of a person, Masteller, mentioned, 6 years after the economic crisis hit, this major survey makes it clear that while the reputations of corporations and the business leaders are improving, there's still a real work to do, and to dispel the doubts about their impact in developing countries.
Mm-hmm. And another area where their economic are still not to the extent where it is matured. Actually, they are. It's not that they are not. Sorry, I'm talking to myself. And when it comes to Hong Kong, if it compares to China, it's definitely a matured economy and it has a matured political system. Hong Kong is different than China because it has a democratic system where people openly protest and they don't have the repercussion. And there are strong supports for these Hong Kong students on these 5-day strikes.
That's correct. HKFS, which stands for the Hong Kong Federation of Students, have been on a mass 5-day strike boycotting the classes since September 22nd. And also, they're protesting China's top legislative bodies rejecting long-promised genuine universal suffrage in the 2017 elections for Hong Kong's next leaders.
And the strike has been seen as a widespread solidarity in academic circle. Academic freedom is one of the key areas where you need to protect, because if you don't protect it, that means your country has no freedom. Freedom doesn't mean in terms of movement. It means in terms of thinking, in terms of ideas. And in countries, for example, like Malaysia, certain acts, for example, Sedition Act, would curb freedom of academic freedom, as we see as you see what is happening right now. And with Hong Kong, definitely they are not happy with it, because Hong Kong, after the agreement in 1997, supposed to be a democratic state within China. It's supposed to be a dual system and single state sort of system. In a way, somehow, if China is trying to dictate how they run their political movement and the policies itself, it will show that it will somehow curb the freedom that these Hong Kong people have been somehow keeping it tightly safe.
But then, like you mentioned, still Hong Kong is more liberated in terms of freedom of expression, and then when it comes to democratic stage compared to China, for sure. But then this strike has been seeing the widespread in academic circle, like you mentioned. And on the first day of strike, the tens of thousands of students participate in the rally, and the government itself from Hong Kong has also responded to the strike.
So in a sense that one of the people in Hong Kong said that the Chinese Communist Party will not give way if they allow universal suffrage in Hong Kong. The chain reaction from Guangdong or the Pearl River Delta in Guangdong will cause incredible problems. However, the Hong Kong media say that the strike will not bring Hong Kong true universal suffrage or make the Chinese Communist Party give away. But the student movement can always plant the seeds of change little by little. So
this is something that especially a nation like us, Malaysia, need to learn from, because this is actually a good example. Mainly because the Hong Kong government itself have listened to what people want to say. When they voice out, they listen and they do respond to the strike and the rally.
One thing that the Hong Kong students, the privilege that Hong Kong students have, that the Beijing students would not have, is definitely it comes to freedom, academic freedom and students' freedom for political participation. Hong Kong students are definitely active in participating the political movement in the country, and that is a sign of freedom of expression that the Hong Kong people need to really tightly keep it safe.
Exactly.
And another area that we need to report is about the British tourists being murdered on a Thai island.
So that did happen a while ago, and now it's the DNA test to be conducted in Singapore from the bodies that are found in the Thailand island. And the Thailand is one of the highlighted countries for tourism.
It's definitely not good in tourism industry for Thailand if a lot of people are being murdered mysteriously.
And then so far, throughout the investigations, they actually suggest that the victim the perpetrator could be actually a Asian guy. And semen found on the body of one of the two British tourist mother on the island in Thailand said that it actually could be a very serious murder cases in Thailand, and it does affect the economic and as well as the tourist, especially tourist part in Thailand.
So right now, what is happening is the DNA will be going to be the DNA test will be conducted in Singapore just to ensure that who is the perpetrator for that murder of the British tourist. Another discussion on tourism is about Chinese travel warning hits Philippine tourism industry. So tens of thousands of Chinese tourists have cancelled trips to the Philippines after a travel warning by Beijing, inflicting major pain on hotels, airlines and tour operators, industry figures said on Tuesday.
And also China warned its citizens this month to avoid visiting Philippines, citing the foiled bomb plot against the Chinese embassy in Manila that happened, and also danger of criminal gangs.
Philippines is a beautiful country. It has really beautiful beaches, really amazing, nice locals, but at the same time the country somehow is not as safe as other countries in Southeast Asia, and that is actually a huge cost for tourism in the Philippines.
It will definitely hit the Philippine tourism industry, especially when China, especially China being one of the biggest countries in the world, have warned the citizen to avoid traveling to Philippines.
China was Philippines' third biggest market for tourism after South Korea, which is your nation, and United States. So these three countries, China, United States, and South Korea, are the major tourist gains to the Philippines.
And yes, and then also we are one of the tourist agencies said that we are very far from Manila, but we are also the ones who's getting the heat. So the government must address China's security concerns and assure that there is no problem.
That's all from us today. When we return, discussion on an ASEAN heritage by youth leaders.
Yes, and don't forget to give us the feedback on our website at durianasean.com, and we also have other channels, social media such as Facebook and YouTube, so please do leave us the feedback on this.